Picture this. You're in the New Mexico desert, and you're watching your creation give birth to an entirely new atomic age, an age of absolutely terrifying, world-ending power. The man at the center of it all was J. Robert Oppenheimer, and this is the story of how he designed the deadliest weapon in human history. So, these are the ancient words that famously popped into Oppenheimer's head right at the moment of that first nuclear explosion. And wow, does it capture the profound and terrifying conflict at the heart of this whole story. This brilliant creator, totally haunted by the destructive power he had just unleashed on the world. Okay, so to really get the bomb, you've got to get the man first. So who was J. Robert Oppenheimer? A patriot? A genius? A total political liability? Well, the thing is, he was all of those things. What's just incredible is how fast he rose. I mean, this guy wasn't just smart, he was on another level. Graduating from Harvard in just 3 years, getting his doctorate at 23, and studying with the absolute titans of quantum mechanics over in Europe. And this whole trajectory, it basically put him on a collision course with history, making him the one-man General Groves believed could actually pull off the Manhattan Project. But, and this is a huge but, he was not an easy choice. I mean, Oppenheimer was just this bundle of contradictions. He was a theoretical genius who couldn't be bothered with basic lab work. He had some dark tendencies, like that infamous story about the poisoned apple, and he was under constant FBI surveillance for his political leanings. And you know, this tells you something really important about these kinds of massive projects. Sometimes the person you need isn't the simplest or safest choice. So here's the bottom line. He was a huge security risk, but to the military, he was also the only guy for the job. Absolutely indispensable. All right, so they've got their guy, and the mission, it didn't start in a lab. Nope. It started with this colossal industrial challenge. And this is a key takeaway, right here. Building this weapon was just as much about logistics and manufacturing on a scale nobody had ever seen before as it was about physics. It was about turning plain old rock into the fuel for a star. So this whole journey starts deep in the earth. You've got tons and tons of uranium ore being dug up, crushed, and literally bathed in acid. This whole process isolates the uranium and creates this bright yellow powder, which gets this famous nickname yellow cake. But here's the thing, you can't use a solid powder in a bomb. So what do? You turn it into a gas, uranium hexafluoride, to get it ready for what is by far the hardest step. And that step is called isotope enrichment. Now, here's the core problem. Most of the uranium you dig up is a stable isotope called U-238. It won't explode. The part that will explode, the fissile U-235, is just a teeny tiny fraction of the total. And fissile is just a fancy word for an atom that you can split to release a massive amount of energy. So enrichment is just this incredibly mind-bogglingly complicated process of sifting through all this uranium to find and concentrate that one rare explosive type. And wow, this chart right here just shows you the scale of the challenge we're talking about. In natural uranium, less than 1% is the good stuff, U-235. For a nuclear power plant, you need to boost that to about 5%. But for a weapon, you have to get that concentration all the way past 80%. It's like trying to find a needle in a haystack and then building a new needle almost entirely out of other microscopic needles you found. It's just insane. So how on earth did they pull this off? The answer is a technology called a centrifuge. Just picture it, thousands of these tubes spinning that uranium gas at absolutely blistering speeds. The useless U-238 is a little heavier, so it gets flung to the outside wall. The lighter, weaponizable U-235 stays closer to the middle, where they can siphon it off. And they don't just do it once. This process gets repeated over and over and over again in these huge buildings, each step making the mix just a little bit richer. Okay, so they have the fuel. But that's only half the battle. Not even close. Now the real puzzle lands on the desk of Oppenheimer's team at Los Alamos. How do you actually design a machine to turn this chunk of metal into a perfectly controlled, catastrophic explosion? The scientists, they basically went down two different paths at the same time. The first idea was something they called a gun-type design, codename Little Boy. Think of it as the simpler, more straightforward approach. It basically works like a cannon. The second one, Fat Man, was way more complicated. It used a totally different fuel, plutonium, and it relied on this really tricky implosion idea to squeeze the core until it exploded. So let's really dig into Little Boy, because it was literally a gun.
First, you've got your regular explosive, cordite, that acts as the charge. It fires a uranium projectile down a gun barrel at over 600 miles an hour, and it slams into the other piece of uranium, the target. The second they hit, these tiny polonium initiators shoot out a bunch of neutrons, which is what picks off that insane runaway nuclear chain reaction. And get this, the whole thing was designed to go off in midair, using things like barometric sensors and radar to make sure it exploded at just the right height to cause the most damage.
So, the theories are done, the fuel is ready, the devices are built. There was only one thing left to do. Find out if any of it actually worked. Everything, the entire project, all the money, all the work, it all came down to this one single moment in the New Mexico desert.
I mean, the pace was just frantic. Think about it. From the day the project officially kicked off in the middle of 1942, it took them less than 3 years to go from just an idea to a working bomb. So on July 16, 1945, everyone gathered at the site that Oppenheimer called Trinity to test the more complicated implosion bomb. And nobody really knew what was going to happen. Was it going to be a dud, or was it going to work all too well? You can just imagine it, the final seconds ticking down, the announcers screaming now, and then silence, and a flash of light so bright it felt impossible, filling up the whole desert, and then, seconds later, this deep, terrifying roar just washes over everyone. The atomic age was here. So, in the middle of this completely world-altering moment, what does Oppenheimer say? While his brother Frank was standing right there, and he said Oppenheimer just kind of relaxed his shoulders and said, "I guess it worked." It's just such a practical, almost weirdly calm response from a guy who just changed the world forever. So the test worked. It was a success. But success in this case meant the weapon was going to be used. The genie was out of the bottle, and Oppenheimer was about to spend the rest of his life dealing with the consequences of what he'd done. And this is what those consequences look like when you break it down into cold, hard data. Just a few weeks later, the bombs were used on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The central fireball, it just vaporized everything. Then you had severe damage and deadly radiation stretching out for kilometers, followed by zones of fire and trauma that went even further. This table really just quantifies the unimaginable power that he and his team had unleashed. It's one of the great ironies of the story, right? The man who built the bomb became one of its biggest critics. He was totally haunted by it, even told President Truman he felt like he had blood on his hands. He became a celebrity and tried to use that fame to argue for international control, to try and stop an arms race before it started. But when he pushed back against the even more powerful H-bomb, and with his political past, well, he made some powerful enemies. And in 1954, at the peak of the Cold War, the very government he served took away his security clearance, which pretty much ended his career in public service. And all of this really leaves us with the big question of Oppenheimer's legacy, a question that's just as relevant now as it was back in 1945. Is it enough for a scientist to just solve the puzzle, to just figure out how something works? Or do they have to take responsibility for how that knowledge gets used? As Oppenheimer's life shows us, there are no easy answers, especially once that genie is out of the bottle.